I think when I was eating meat, I wasn't as healthy as I am now, and I ate too much. In fact, I was a couple of stone fatter than I am now. Certainly when I lived at home and ate lots of the wrong things, I had 2 or 3 stone more on me. And I just find that meat stays in the system so long and slows you down. On the dietary side, meat is not very good for you. It's full of cortisone and antibiotics. The animal might have been ill. You're actually not eating very good food anymore.
The press thrives on shock horror stories. Either something is going to make you live forever or it's going to kill you. Recent surveys suggest that people actually become vegetarian now mainly because of belief it's actually healthier, and they may not share a lot of these ethical beliefs. There are other vegetarian groups in England, such as the Asian population, who are vegetarian but actually have higher than average rates of heart disease and diabetes in the general population. So the general rule is that, avoiding meat is going to protect you from heart disease isn't true.
I issued a challenge in which I said I would give £10,000 to 4 or 5 adults, preferably intensive farmers, who would live in a scaled-up human battery cage for 7 days and 7 nights. These 4 men were very confident that they would last a whole week in the cage, laughing and joking as they walked into it. But in fact, they lasted only 18 hours.
Carnivores and vegetarians alike should condemn factory farming. It's brutal, cruel, squalid, and it's counterproductive. The meat is not worth eating.
If people want to oppose intensive farming, becoming a vegetarian is not the best way to do it. What people should be doing if they're concerned about intensive farming is making sure that they only buy meat which is free range from specialised outlets. And that way, consumer pressure will force farmers to think more carefully about the way they rear their animals.
I try always to get meat that's organic and been running around fields, learning a bit of Greek, speaking happily, singing, skipping.
I guess I should be grateful when a vegetarian tells me with dour glee that I risk contracting Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease from the ingestion of beef. But it never seems that such warnings are given in the spirit of altruism. Far from it. A harder heart than mine would reply, yes, lettuce head, but you're far more prone to blood disorders than we are.
People who take on vegetarian diets in an untutored way do put themselves at risk of vitamin B12 deficiency, which can lead to damage to the nervous system, rickets, particularly in children. It's a bone disorder caused by vitamin D deficiency.
Eat too much, smoke, do too little, and it may not just be your heart you hurt.
There exists an unwitting collusion between pulse extremists and the Minister of Health's tax-funded propaganda, which may not be specifically pro-veg, but which is strenuously directed towards the sort of self-denial of which vegetarianism is the brand leader.
As long as it's preaching long life, we're foolish enough to think, good old government, yes, that sounds a good idea to have long life. Well, then you examine this long life which it's offering, and it's a life in the last 10 years, perhaps, spent in a sort of semi-conscious state, lying in racks, being turned like wet hay 3 times every 24 hours.
There's a great danger in our society of blaming people's ill health on them.
Yeah.
And this is typified in sort of government policy nowadays, that if you're ill, you're somehow culpable. I think the truth is that 80% of what's going to happen to you is going to happen anyway. That is partly determined by genetics, by factors we don't understand, and then maybe you've got 20% to play with.
If I were really told you live to 92 instead of 90, or 58 instead of 56, I'll tell the doctor to go to hell.
Yeah.
For 2 years, and vegetarianism, no sir. I'll go down with the meat.
1 week you hear in the paper that you mustn't eat that, you mustn't drink too much wine, or you must have margarine. The week after you hear margarine is bad for you because it can cause cancer. At the end of the day, go and eat and be happy.
Vegetarianism is an instrument for the suppression of hedonism and of the enjoyment of the brief period that's allotted to us. We even have to borrow the very expression, joie de vivre. I don't mean to suggest that hedonism is necessarily conditional upon the ingestion of large amounts of dead flesh, but I would argue that pleasure is a quixotic pursuit in a country which so willingly submits to a culture of repression, which is so mutely deferential. By far the most influential vegetarian of the modern world was Adolf Hitler, who was also a non-smoking, teetotal opponent of blood sports. Many of his qualities are shared by today's extreme vegetarians. Fanaticism, a background in crankish cults, and, most telling, a moral inversion in their attitude to animals.
And I feel that there's an exact similarity between what the Nazis did to human beings and what we are doing to intensively farmed creatures today.
This vegetarian came across and sat, and he got very hostile to me because he belonged to, I think, the Goose Liberation Front or something like that, and that he would lay down his life for the goose's liver, and that I was a reactionary, and you, Dr. So, you're always talking about the freedom of blacks, and he actually equated the freedom of blacks with the freedom of the goose. Now, I can't understand that. I can't be anything but hostile to that kind of tyranny.
I think most of us, honestly, if we thought that someone that we knew, or someone we didn't know, whose life might be spared through research on animals, I think very few people would say, no, let the rat live.
The odds are that you will get more punishment if you abuse an animal than if you abuse a child. So it speaks for the nation. The nation care far more about their animal than they seem to care far more about their animal than they care for their children.
Hitler declared that the Aryan is closer to animals than he is to Jews. A similar, but evidently less deadly sort of zoophiliac relativism is manifest in today's dangerously sentimental turnip people.
Every day in this country alone, we witness the equivalent of the Jewish Holocaust in the Second World War. Whereas it took the Nazi exterminators 6 years to dispatch the Jews, the homosexuals, the gypsies, the subnormal, the politically unacceptable, we actually brutally murder 6 million sentient beings every single day of the year.
This false equation of humans and animals degrades humans. We are more unlike animals than we are like them. But try telling that to the poor benighted dorks who have the temerity to compare factory farms to Auschwitz. That terrible place was a site of the mass destruction of people. The gulf between humans and animals is so vast that thankfully only about 4% of the population is unable to see it. But that's still something like 2.5 million people. Many, it appears, from the gregarious trades of theatre and pop music. Gregarious derives from the Latin word for flock, and thespians are nothing if not sheep-like in their conformity to daringly controversial faiths and sects. These spudheads are so caringly alternative. They've got a cause ready-made, straight off the peg, different, without being too different. It confirms membership of the Great Concerned. But the Great Concerned are not so concerned that they shun leather or chicken or fish.
I try to lead my life in the most inoffensive way I can. I don't like to eat eggs because I don't like eating eggs, but I'm not a vegan, and I have worn and do wear leather shoes, and I don't feel happy with myself for doing that. But maybe in time I will too be kinder and stop wearing shoes.